stick around if you want to learn all the hints and tips of how to make this gorgeous all-round arrangement. Welcome back to what I think is going to be the third video in the Back to Basics series. We've looked at a vertical arrangement that continued on to an L, and today I'm going to come down onto the table to create an all-round arrangement that would ideally sit in the centre of a table. Now, I think this is week 3, but it possibly could be week 4 because I've done 2 arrangements with the same flowers so that you can see 2 different versions of a Posy arrangement. And this design that I'm going to do today is probably the first arrangement I would normally teach beginners when they're learning floral design. But because I wanted to use the flowers without adding any extra greenery or a second bunch of flowers, I've made the design twice. I think that way you get to learn different styles of arranging, but seeing how the same type of flowers work. I think that's quite beneficial, but you might think otherwise. So the flowers that I've already got, I've been cut down short, and I'm going to create a nice all-round arrangement. I think we're going to add a candle in the middle. That wasn't my plan, but I've just realised I've got a beautiful candle that's going to link really nicely with my gerbera, and that's going to help me create a really beautiful all-round design. But before I add the candle, we'll talk about my floral foam. Now, if you're making a design where you need to have wire netting, then you'll need to have a container that will hide the wire netting. This foam here is sitting in a plastic dish, and I've got the foam so that the wider part of the foam is on the top. I don't want to do it this way because my stems of my flowers are really thick. I've got sunflowers and gerbera, and they're really thick stemmed. If I was to arrange with the foam upright, I wouldn't have enough foam to get all those flower stems in. And then I'm going to use the floral tape over the top, and I'm going to take it sort of diagonally across the top. And I always go round and finish off on the top so that it doesn't unravel. Trust me, it unsticks, and you don't want your arrangement falling apart right at the very end. So finish your floral tape on top, stuck to the tape, and you know it's not going to fall apart. And then I'm going to add in this lovely apricot sort of coloured candle. I think that's a beautiful colour link with my gerbera. Now, if you didn't have the candle, that would be where your one single flower would go to create the height of your arrangement. In the other arrangement that I'm going to do, that is going to be where the rose is sitting, so you can compare the two. Whether you've seen it already or whether it's coming next week, who knows? And my single rose looked just like this. So this would be where my candle is. But what I'm going to do today is sit it to one side. Now, traditionally with an all-round arrangement, we tend to have flowers balanced on either side. But this is a supermarket bunch of flowers, and it only had one rose in it. So I can't get that sort of structured formal pattern like I had in the previous arrangement. And before I do any more, I'm going to create an outline with some greenery. Now, this one is Florist Leatherleaf. It probably grows in the garden for some of you that are in more tropical conditions. But here in the UK, it's a greenery that we buy at a florist shop, or if you're a florist, from your florist supplies. But what you're looking for the outside is ideally something that's quite flat, as opposed to something that's quite bushy like this. So the flat greenery creates a better outline. And what I'm going to do is cut 3 that are the same length. And then I know my arrangement is hopefully going to be fairly circular. You can do this with 5 pieces of greenery or 6 pieces of greenery. You can mix the greeneries. I like to use 3 for a beginner style of arrangement because it's easy to follow. And what I'm aiming to do with these is have them pretty much the length of my container. So they're slightly too long, so we can get rid of that end bit, keep that for later. You're aiming to have your green roughly the same length as the width of your container. or in my case, my foam and my plastic dish. And that will give me a fairly good balanced design. And I'm going to aim, in fact, I'm going to put it in front of the rose and it will make more sense to you when I explain. If you think of that rose as being 12 o'clock, I've put my first position in at 12. One of them's going to go in roughly at 4 o'clock, and then one of them's going to go in roughly at 7-ish o'clock. So the gap in between this one, and this one here is fairly similar. And if you look from above, hopefully if you follow the line around the outside, mine is quite good because I have a turntable, then you will have a circular design. And I can tell by looking in the overhead camera that this side is slightly longer, and that is because I'm in the corner of the foam. So the corner of the foam is wider than the flat section here. And if you're a beginner, you could quite easily draw yourself a circle on the table and then follow the shape. Now, the reason I didn't use 4 was because 4 is very angular and very pointed. It almost makes your design look quite square. So if you're making a square arrangement, do 4. If it's round, do 3, 5 or 6, because it makes the design more pleasing. And these are just guidelines. You don't have to follow them to the letter, but it will really help you create a lovely outline shape and a circular design. And then what I'm going to do in between is cut myself 3 more pieces of greenery to a similar length, and I'm going to pop those in between. Now this one is myrtle. This is a garden foliage as well as a florist foliage, and I've had this in here for wedding work we've been doing on the weekend. And that now completes that outline shape. I know there are gaps in the middle. You can fill in with extra greenery if you want to, but I'm going to leave some space in between so that at the beginning the design isn't too cluttered. This little bit of myrtle here is not quite as full as the other pieces, so I'm going to add a smaller piece in just to fill that area out there. And I'm going to get rid of that bit because that was a bit scruffy. But we have a fairly circular outline shape. I'm going to move that one slightly. And at this stage, I would recommend putting the design down on the floor. Look at it from a further distance away and you'll see whether or not there's a nice circular shape. And then what we're going to do next, or what I'm going to do next, is put in my really large sunflowers. I like to work with my bigger flower first, because if you know you've spread those out, then you can work everything else around it. And just like we did with that clock, imagine that to be 12 o'clock, and then we're going to put 2 in here. And fortunately for me, my choice of sunflowers, which came from a mixed bunch, the choice that was in the bunch is slightly uneven. You'll see now that this final one is really quite small, and that's going to make my circular design a little bit more unbalanced, but I'm not going to worry about it. So if we think from this position, this is 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock. The gap in between each one is fairly circular. And if you think about this as the middle of a compass, and these, or the middle of a wheel, these are all the spokes coming out of the wheel. And that's really how you get this formal pattern. Formal arrangements are when you've got pattern and structure. Informal is when a design is much looser and much more natural and has a more countryside vibe to it. So then I'm going to do my gerbera in between each one of my carnations. They're not carnations. In between each one of my sunflower. And if you're arranging flowers that are soft stemmed like a gerbera into foam, you need to cut it straight. Don't cut it at an angle. I know lots of people will tell you to cut it at an angle, but that's only when it goes into water. If you cut it straight across, it's got much more strength in the bottom and it will go into your foam far more securely. And then I'm repeating that pattern and I'm creating one gerbera in between each of my sunflower placements. And there we have a really simple version of an all-round arrangement. Front facing is when you see it from one side, all round is pretty much self-explanatory. It's when you can see it from all directions. And it's normally used for the centre of a table. It could be a funeral tribute. It's very rarely used for a window or a tall desk because you don't see the flowers at the back. But there we are, a fairly even distribution of those 7 flowers that came out of that mixed bunch. Included also in that mixed bunch were 2 pink carnations. Now these should be a little bit more open, and I've peeled the calyx back slightly and just given it a little bit of a fluff, but I think they've possibly been cut from the plant too early and they're not going to open as wide as they should. And because I've got that 1 rose there in the middle, I'm going to make use of those 2 remaining carnations to come up the middle. Now they don't follow the same pattern because obviously the flower is different, but we've still got that circular shape with 3 flowers. So I'm repeating what I've already started on the outside. And if you haven't learnt your elements and principles of design, then repetition, repeating patterns, repeating shapes, colours and textures is something that you need to know. And incidentally, if you pop over to the website, and I will link it here in the cards, you can buy a really handy guide on the elements and principles of design and a care guide relating to looking after your fresh flowers. And if you're training to be a florist, they're an invaluable source to have. Now I've got my basic outline shaping, I'm going to strengthen the outline. So I'm going to add in with the foliage some spray carnations. These have also come from a supermarket, and I chose this colour because I thought it went so well with my little gerbera, or not such a small gerbera. They go well with my big gerbera. And this is what we would call a filler flower or a secondary flower. These are the more important focal flowers. These are almost like the backup singers that accompany that soloist on the stage. And out of 1 stem, I'm probably going to get 3 or 4 flowers. And that makes it a really economical flower to use. And I'm coming down low in between the greenery. I'm going to hang on to those and use them in a minute. I'm just going to reinforce the outline, coming in between each set of greenery all the way around the outside until I've come round in a full circle. And ideally this needs to be a small flower, so a spray carnation, a freesia, spray rose, something that's dainty and small to reinforce the outline. The larger flowers, like the gerbera and the sunflower, always come towards the middle because they are your focal flower and the most dominant flower in the arrangement. And there we have it, your outline shape reinforced. If you wanted to put more greenery in there, you're quite welcome. I don't want to fill up with greenery and then find it difficult to get my flowers into the foam. And because we have this circular outline, I now need to continue adding flowers in the same colour up towards the top, so that colour is being brought all the way through. We don't want it just on the outside because it almost splits your arrangement into tiers. We don't want a tier of that peachy colour around the outside and no repetition of the colour up towards the top. So I'm going to keep going, adding in all the way along, some up the middle, some in between. I really love the little buds. Look at that. Isn't that just so sweet? Because it introduces a different shape into the arrangement. It's a small flower and it's going to help link and join up all the different shapes and colours and textures in the arrangement. Now I teach beginners a lot here in the studio, and I always encourage them to get an outline shape in before you start filling in. People are quite often really eager and keen to get those flowers in, but then they lose the outline shape that they're trying to create. So rather than rushing in and trying to get your flowers in first, spend a little bit of time working on your outline, and then the remaining flowers and foliages will just link in quite nicely and fill in the little gaps as you go along. Now this design would be perfect in the centre of a table at Christmas, ideal for any type of dinner party, and fantastic for a wedding centrepiece. And if you don't have matching flowers like I've got here, just think about putting your bigger flowers towards the middle and your smaller flowers towards the outside to get that nice shape. Included in that mixed bunch that came from the supermarket was a really pretty flower called a September flower. It's from the aster family. They were quite large like this when I bought them originally, but they've been cut down into 2 separate pieces. And that gives me the ability to spread out the colour in the arrangement, so we don't just have it in one position, we have it all the way around. And what I'm going to try and do now is spread this nice purple colour out. I felt that this was a really good colour combination. For me, it represents the end of the summer and the start of the autumn. Nice big bright yellow sunflowers, and then moving into the peachier shades that we generally see as we move into a different season. And then one more final piece of that little September flower, and we have a really exciting design which is quite simple to make, with one mixed bunch from the supermarket and some spray carnations to go with it. Just going to grab my foliage. Now in that mixed bunch from the supermarket was one piece of pittosporum, which I've cut down into smaller pieces, and one piece or 2 pieces of the rhododendron. So don't panic if you've got one piece and you're not quite sure what to do with it. See if you can cut it down into smaller sections, and it will suit a much smaller design. And then what I'm going to do with this is fill in all the gaps. So keep turning the arrangement around. If you haven't got a turntable, it's a really good one to have in your toolkit. You can get a fairly inexpensive one from IKEA, which is ideal for home use. Or if you're looking for a stand, look for cake stands because they're easier to get hold of. And I'm a bit limited with this greenery because it's already been cut to one size and one length. But what I need to do is just feed it in between the flowers. Don't swamp the flowers and hide them. The foliage is there to enhance the flowers. It's there to strengthen the outline. It's not there to take over the arrangement and hide all those beautiful flowers. So I'm going to keep on working all the way around until I can't see any more floral foam. If you didn't have greenery, you could use something like gypsophila or September flower. You could even use some moss quite tightly compact around the floral foam before you start right at the very beginning. So with the small bits that I've got left of the original leather leaf, I can add these in more towards the centre so that there's a link with the greenery that's on the outside. Otherwise, it tends to look like 2 separate designs. A design with foliage that gives us a collar or an outline, and then nothing to match it in the middle. And that's all about rhythm and repetition. It's about repeating textures, colours and shapes towards the middle. Also used myrtle, so any short pieces of myrtle are going to come in handy just up here at the top again, so that we've got a connection with what's on the outside. And one of the reasons that I've done 2 arrangements with the same flowers is because I know that many of you can't get hold of greenery, so I've also done the same type of arrangement but without the candle, so that you can understand how to create a design if you don't have any extra greenery. And that's my design completed. If we look at it from the overhead camera, hopefully we've got a really good circular shape, an even distribution of all the colours and flowers. And if this was placed on a table and you and I were sitting opposite it, there would be something exciting to see on both sides of the table. At this point, I'm going to remind you to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be told every time I upload a new tutorial. Like and share, comment in the box and let me know what you think and whether or not you've learned something new today. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching and goodbye for now.